Good afternoon. I'm Walter Sterling, president of St. John's College in Santa Fe, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to our event this afternoon here in the renovated and reopened Pritzker Student Center. So welcome all. As you all know, this is a consequential weekend with a lot of things going on. We had a presidential inauguration yesterday involving me. We had our board, our Board of Visitors and Governors has been meeting. Our St. John's College Alumni Association board has been meeting. We had a dedication and ribbon cutting of this renewed and renovated building on Thursday. It's been quite a weekend. Last night, we had a conversation with Shiloh Brooks, who's rejoining us today. We have this event this afternoon, and tomorrow afternoon, we conclude our events here on campus with a lecture by Musa Al-Gharbi, who's joining us. Now, before I say some more about what we're doing right here, and I didn't get synced up with him right before this, but the president of our Alumni Association, Brett Hevner, is here, and there's an important event happening tomorrow in addition to the board's meeting this weekend. Brett, would you like to come up and take the microphone for a minute?
Yeah. So tomorrow we are having our annual Alumni Association Award reception. It's going to be at 10 o'clock in the morning at the Scottish Rite. Everybody is invited to come. We're going to be honoring 6 alums who have contributed vastly to legal areas, and particularly environmental law, journalism, and education. We're also going to be recognizing our volunteer service awards, people who volunteered for the college. And this year we're awarding for the volunteers who served on the college's history task force that were charged by the Board of Visitors and Governors to kind of examine the college's early history, including the history of slavery and how we can address that sort of thing. So I think it's going to be a really great event. We're going to have the small chorus sing, and we're also going to have a little piano music as well. So all are welcome. I hope you can come. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to very briefly introduce the folks on the platform today. There were longer bios, and if I read them all, I'd be up here for even longer than I'm going to be. So I'm just going to say what they're doing now and highlight those that have books out. And I believe that we have 3 authors here, books available from our bookstore, and that they are willing to sign books after this event in the junior common room next door. And then I'll make a few more comments about the event itself. So we have with us, let's see, I'll sort of try to go from one end to the other. First of all, we have 2 moderators from our faculty who are themselves alumni. So we have Sarah Stickney with us, and she and Obed Lira are going to conduct the conversation. We'll have about 45 minutes of activity among the panel, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. We have Shiloh Brooks back again after a wonderful event last night. Shiloh is the president and CEO of the George W. Bush Presidential Center and professor of practice in the Department of Political Science at SMU. We have Amy Lloyd, a national leader in education and workforce development, who is serving as the CEO of All for Ed. We have Carter Sneed, who holds the Charles E. Rice University Professorship of Law at the University of Notre Dame, where he is also professor of political science, and he is the author of What It Means to Be Human, The Case for the Body in Public Bioethics. And we have Salvatore Scabona. He is the Sue Ann and John Weinberg Director of the Coleman Center for Scholars and Writers at the New York Public Library, and author of 2 critically acclaimed novels, The End and more recently, The Volunteer. We have Jane McManus, an academic and author currently teaching at Columbia and NYU. She's the author of The Fast Track, Inside the Surging Business of Women's Sports. We have Sarakaman Annette Prapasari, a designer who believes our greatest challenges are also design questions, and she serves as the executive director of Creative Santa Fe, right here in Santa Fe. And then we have Mr. Lira at the other end. So just join me for a moment in welcoming all of these alumni to the stage. Now, this event, as the two other public events this weekend, are being held under the rubric of a new platform, a new program that we're calling the Buchanan Forum, in honor of Scott Buchanan, the founder of our academic program in Annapolis in 1937. And I'm going to read a passage about Buchanan in memory of him, and then a couple of sentences about the vision of this forum that has been launched by a very generous gift by a friend here in Santa Fe. Scott Buchanan was a teacher and a learner, a man of doctrine and of discipline in the ancient senses of those two words. He adapted the themes and topics of the history of thought and action to the circumstances of concrete experiences and to the problems of present emergencies. And he sought liberating arts and regulating disciplines to guide men in the specification and in the use of the possibilities of imagination and the ideas of wisdom. That was from Richard McKeon, a very great scholar at the University of Chicago. So since 1937, students and faculty at St. John's College have sought to meet the challenges that face our country and liberal democracies around the world by reading and discussing the books that form the roots of our civilization. The goal of the Buchanan Forum at St. John's College is to expand the reach of the college's founding vision of worldly engagement grounded on liberal education. Our goal is to reach anyone who seeks a thoughtful life amid today's rapid technological, cultural, and political flux. To that end, the Buchanan Forum will offer a wide variety of both public-facing lectures and colloquia, as well as smaller, more intensive programming. So this event today, as well as Shiloh's talk last night and Musa's talk tomorrow, are all being held as the inaugural events of the Buchanan Forum. Now, this one in particular fits what our hopes are for this event. And I'll just say, when we were planning this weekend, and I was thinking about my inauguration and everything else that would be going on, I wanted to have one event that I thought would speak particularly to our students and the way in which they look at this education and try to see how it's going to launch them in the world after St. John's. And selfishly, I wanted to have an excuse to bring some alumni that I know well, respect, follow their careers, and draw great inspiration from. And that's true of all 6 folks here. All 8, actually, including my 2 faculty colleagues, but the 6 guests we have with us. And we put it under the title, The Life of the Mind at Work in the World, which I think very much captures that idea that Buchanan had, that this is not an insular education, it's an education that equips you for life. That's a phrase, the life of the mind at work in the world, that I borrow from a colleague and friend, former dean and vice president of St. John's College, Victoria Mora, and it stayed with me for many years since I heard her suggest that that was a very pithy way of thinking about what St. John's is about. One more thing I'll say with a little bit of a harder edge to it, as you heard, many of you heard me in my inaugural address yesterday, celebrate the strengths of this education, and I can preach on that all day and all night and flatten round and so on, and I believe in it. That said, there are many good reasons why somebody might not come to St. John's College, but one of the worst reasons is one of the ones that's most often invoked, that it's not practical preparation for life. That's the worst reason because it's very, very far from the truth. And what we have in front of us today are 6 of our alumni, and then tomorrow we will have another 6 that we'll hear about that are proof in the flesh of the way in which this education prepares you for life in all senses. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to our moderators, Sarah Stickney and Obed Lira, to get the conversation going. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to our guests.
Thanks so much, Walter, and thanks all of you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. One of the things that makes me very proud to be a member of this community is our generosity. We're generous with our time, we're generous with each other's ideas in class and out of class, and I think it's a real testament to that generosity that these well-known, very busy, very interesting alumni have come here from all parts of the country to speak to us. And kind of thinking about what Walter was saying, the sense of how is it practical, or how does this thing that we do here maybe meet the world? I was thinking another thing that makes me proud to be part of this community is, unlike many colleges, we are not very interested in minimizing friction down to zero, right? We're actually kind of interested in friction as an educational tool. So I thought it might be interesting to start by asking you all, what was something that frustrated you or even angered you? You can determine the level of emotional intensity of the question. What was something that frustrated you while you were here that has since turned out to be something you were grateful for or relied on? And I don't know if it makes sense to go down the line. There are so many of you. Or you can sort of gaze at each other, seminar style. We're not around a table, so.
I can go on
Beautiful,
that.
beautiful, thank
I'll
you.
raise my hand. So one of the things that really frustrated me at St. John's was more men talking than women in the seminar settings, and having to listen to people that I disagreed with. And sometimes they go on for quite a while.
Yes.
But I find that actually, because you're in your own head in those moments, that figuring out how to engage in that way and not be intimidated in those spaces has absolutely, when I wanted to be a sports writer, the idea of going into all male spaces, talking to people who don't want you there, et cetera, it was a piece of cake, because I feel like I'd already been engaging face to face in that way for so long.
I think the feeling of being completely over my head, that the demands of of work, of reading, were so far beyond anything that I was prepared for, that and then they increase, that basically on every day of the program I was just barely coming up for air and just able to survive. Like getting all of my work done, and then also having to, I worked in the coffee shop, I worked in the library, I was a tutor to a kid in town, and but that basically like the experience that I could get through that kind of difficulty, and while not reading the book perfectly, I still had read the book, and then 2 years later, I realized that I was still reading the book in my mind in a way that became fuller and fuller. So I think what I learned was to be more patient with my own, to be able to tolerate a kind of difficulty that I think another form of education that might have been trying to meet me directly where it thought I was able would have really let me down. We like in weightlifting or something like that, where you're like, hey, I can bench press 35 pounds. And like, if you just bench press 35 pounds the rest of your life, that's all you're ever going to be able to do. You have to do more. So I think the program frightened me that way, yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading Parts of Animals. It was the first lab reading that we had freshman year, and wondering if someone had left words out of the paragraph. Because I didn't, and then the second thought was like, what have I done? I don't belong here. I can't even read a little tiny paragraph and make sense of it. But in terms of the frustration, when you first, especially early on in the program, and this is to Jane's point too, I think, you're kind of in a hurry to get to the answers of the questions, and you want tutors to tell you the answers to the questions. You have to like listen to other people talk, and you want to get to it. But then you realize over the course of the 4 years, and then especially now in my life, when you're dealing with complex questions about which people feel very strongly and people disagree about very strongly, you need a community to actually learn most deeply and most robustly. You can't do it by yourself. You can't really even just do it one-on-one. You actually need a community of people from different perspectives and with different gifts to be able to really actually come to understand things.
I want to build on what you were just saying, and Salvatore, what you said resonated with me. I was thinking about the John Donne piece of like, a man's reach must exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for, right? I lead work that is centered on choice-filled lives. And I think a hard thing for me was not having choice and doing things that I wouldn't choose to do on my own. Like when you were just talking, I was thinking, oh, Heidegger. Wow. And I loved the challenge, but stepping into a space of engaging with material that challenged me in ways that I would not necessarily seek out on my own in community with others, where our differences are generative. That friction is what allows us to all be sharper, right? It helps us lean into a space differently. If I were reading Heidegger on my own in my quiet bedroom, like that would be a very different experience than around a seminar table with people who have vastly different opinions, perspectives, lived experiences than I do. And so I think the opportunity to step into productive disequilibrium in partnership with others who are all tackling things as part of a community is what makes this place so special. So the fact that I didn't have choice was something that I stepped into of my own will. Of course, that itself was a choice. And then the choice to engage is such a powerful, different dimension that I feel like I carry forward every day in my work now. So I'm grateful for that question. That's a good one.
I'm writing down productive disequilibrium.
Yes.
I would say, the most frustrating thing for me is how disorienting the education is. It called into question my deepest held convictions and exposed them as mere convictions, things I was raised to believe about God, democracy, justice, love, virtue. And those things were challenged, and they were exposed for the fact that I couldn't make arguments to prove they were true. And there were these writers who were making much more sophisticated arguments than I could. And so I think in the spirit of a genuine liberal education, that education liberated me from my convictions and encouraged me to pursue what's true and to develop the ability to give an argument for something that I believe is right. And I think that as a leader who has to make decisions every day, that's one of the things that I've taken away from the college, is that when I go into a room and have to make a decision and explain it to people, first of all, I better be sure that it's a just, right, and good decision. And second, I better be sure that I can explain it. I can't walk in there with my prejudices or my convictions. So I think that's what this education really, really taught me. It was frustrating in the beginning, but now it's led to all sorts of success in my life.
So Sarah, I actually wish I had a time turner. For those of you who don't know Harry Potter.
Oh, we've read it.
Oh, yeah. Just for good measure, we share context here. It's a device in which you can time travel. And it's funny, Amy, that you said that the thing is about not having any choice. For me, the most agony time is preceptorial choices. So in your junior year and senior year here, you actually get to choose. Do we get one a year?
Yes.
One a year, okay. So there was 2 choices we get to make in the undergrad program. And I wish I had more time to do more preceptorials. And because it's a more intimate setting, the faculty members themselves get to do their own thing. They don't have to be from the main portion of the entree. And I just loved seeing what I think our tutor we see as model students, what they're thinking about, what they want to explore, and be in that community with them as they're exploring that. Because sometimes they're picking things that they're not necessarily an expert in, which is super authentic, and they're wanting friendship from young minds who are equally hungry and curious about that work. So yeah, my main frustration is I wish there was a time turner. Yeah.
Well, speaking of tutors, and how we are kind of model teachers and not really, I was really happy to see model students. Sorry, thank you. And in the website now, I looked this morning and we got that back. The following teachers are returning to St. John's: Cervantes, Aristotle, Jane Austen. So my question is about those teachers. Which teachers have left a deep impression on you? Another way of asking the question: what program authors just shook you and kind of stayed with you? I mean, it doesn't have to be that you're all busy people and maybe you don't have the free time to revisit Aristotle or Jane Austen or John Donne as you would, maybe you do. But I do believe that the authors stay with us. echo throughout all of our thinking. They leave like an imprint in the wax of our souls, let's say. So who would that be for you?
So I love to begin because the work that I do for creatives through Creative Santa Fe's community building work, we create community initiatives, host events, create gathering, designing them to really bridge the social divides so for us to be able to imagine a more vibrant and inclusive future locally here and within the region. And the work that sits with me, so I'm an immigrant into this country, and I know that a lot of people who come to this college loves reading. That was the opposite. I actually couldn't even finish a New York Times article before I came to the college. But for me, I love learning model through dialogue, that accountability where there is no lecturer who's going to give you that knowledge and you are required to show up in that space. And so I think a lot about the reason why I came to this education was because I wanted to understand what are the things that underpin Americans' thinking. So the book for me is Democracy in America, which I have found so fascinating because I just reread it a couple of years ago. And as a designer, I thought it was so brilliant that the way that democracy was designed from the very beginning of this version of it was it's in a nested model where the most closest model of a township is when democracy is best expressed. And then it's nested out to the city and then to the country, to the county. And, so it has this expression of itself. So when people get real mad about what's going on a larger scale, I always come back to that book and said, well, it is, first of all, an experiment. And I'm constantly observing through, I'm like, oh, I wonder what this 26-year-old French guy got off the boat who told his superior that he was going to come here to look at prison system, but really he was way more interested in understanding how democracy was playing out. So that book is continually something I go back and reference. And even I love how all these chapters talk about how Americans' approach to the arts, to the science, are so much more different than what happens in European, and why, right? So that's my book.
I was going to say the same book.
Tell me
He's
why.
a popular teacher.
Why?
But I will take a step. I will say I was going to say that book because my work centers on public policy. All of my work has been around our greater good, centering our humanity in it. Prior to leading the nonprofit organization I currently lead, I was an assistant secretary at the U.S. Department of Education, which is going through interesting times right now. But I worked, intensively on leading our nation's federal policy related to work that may feel very different in kind to St. John's: career and technical education, adult education and family literacy, community and technical colleges, correctional education. Those were my anything at the intersection of education, workforce development, and economic development. And I often was thinking about de Tocqueville and our notion of what does it mean to be a nation that is both being and becoming at the same time, and how do we always strive to be our most, the best version of ourselves, a more perfect union through public policy. And so I also return to that as a touchstone, but I will say that I did my enabling essay and my senior essay on Shakespeare, and just the notion of humanity and understanding the complexity of how we live our values is another space that I delve deeply in. And just earlier this week, I had an all-staff meeting where I was sharing parts of Newton's Principia with folks. And so my love, and I think about Aristotle. I used to lead a correctional education program of re-entry, and our mantra was change from the outside in, kind of returning to Aristotelian principles of what does it mean to become a good member of a community, and how do you be the good if you do not understand the good? And so I returned to different elements of the program throughout my life. But it's funny that you said that, because that's immediately what jumped to mind for me too.
I got a weird one. So I was going to say Aristotle on friendship was
yes.
really, has formed me, especially more recently, in thinking about how we stand in relation to each other and what we owe to each other. But But the one that comes to mind that's the weird one is Erwin Strauss on the upright posture from the freshman lab, in which he talks about how the configuration of the body actually is important and is a source of understanding of what the thing itself is, and how our upright posture, we can draw inferences from our upright posture about how we stand in the world and what we do and how we relate to others in comparison to other animal forms and their various dispositions. And it was the first time I ever thought about how the physical world as it presents itself can be a source of understanding and knowledge about what things are. And it's not simply the case that everything is just, inchoate stuff that you can impose your will on and bend and extract and do all kinds of things, but instead things actually have a kind of internal meaning that can be discerned from their physical configuration.
That's the walking is an interrupted stumble one.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, if you
So
did the
fabulous.
experiment where you stand there with you guys will remember this, but you take your shoes off and stand there and make your feet completely limp, you will fall forward because we're not sufficiently, we have not actually stood upright yet. We're still about to fall forward on our knuckles.
That sounds like productive discourse.
Being and becoming.
I think it's very difficult to choose a single author. That's the hardest question I've been asked all weekend, and I was up here for darn near 3 hours last night getting asked questions. I would say, I'll just say very briefly 3. One is Friedrich Nietzsche. The reason it's Nietzsche is that you get to the end of the curriculum and Nietzsche calls into question the veracity of the entire curriculum. He's both the highest product of the West and its most profound critic. And I'd never met someone, I thought the curriculum was good and that the authors were wise. And then Nietzsche comes along and says Plato is boring, Spinoza is a vengeance seeker, and starts calling these great people names. So that was shocking. And also that he had called into question my own desire for truth. I thought I was pursuing truth. Nietzsche turns the question back on me and says, what in you wants truth? What if your desire for truth is merely a prejudice? And so that was very disorienting, as I mentioned a moment ago. The second would be Niccolo Machiavelli. The reason is that Machiavelli, I'd never seen an author who spoke to me in the second person. He called me you. It's almost as though he was teaching me and that he was my father. But I'd always thought you were supposed to be a person of character. And Machiavelli advised me precisely not to be a person of character. Were I to be a person of character, I might not rise to the heights of leadership that I hoped I would, and that I should change my nature with the winds of fortune, and that I should not hesitate to lie, cheat, dissemble, steal, and murder when such circumstances called for it. So that was really eye-opening. And then third would have been Euclid, and the reason is because I didn't know how to construct an argument. And when I read Abraham Lincoln, I was just reading the Gettysburg Address and giving a talk on it. And one of the things that I notice is that Lincoln refers to the first sentence of the Declaration, and he says the proposition that all men were created equal. Jefferson says this is self-evident, that all men are created equal. I then thought about Euclid, that there were things that were self-evident and that there were things that were propositions. And that I had read that Abraham Lincoln had read Euclid, and that Abraham Lincoln had constructed the solid arguments you'll find in the Lincoln-Douglas debates based on a kind of logic model of Euclidean geometry. He had gone through the propositions. And I began to see that Abraham Lincoln was, in fact, inserting Euclid into the nation's history to revise what Jefferson said about the self-evidence that all men are created equal. In fact, it's a proposition that has to be proved. We can't assume it the way we would assume that a straight line extends to infinity. It has to be proved, right, like the Pythagorean theorem. And so I think Euclid, carrying that with me and the substance and weight of what's required to make a good argument and seeing that in the life of a man like Lincoln was really, really moving. So those authors stick with me a lot.
Shiloh, I want to add to that. Because of Euclid, I write better papers because I said, when I say this, what's the justification? It's like literally always a proof. And the way I read other people's writing, especially, their thinking is also in that same manner. So I see that you have a statement you just say, and there's some sort of a conclusion you're trying to present to me, but there are many gaps in which, from your opening statement and to your conclusion, can you walk me through this, right? But it is truly because of Euclid that I became a better thinker and a better writer.
I'll go with my book. I agree that this is the hardest question I've ever been asked. And also, have so many things. I've done a lot. I've taught a couple of ethics classes recently. So going back and getting out my copy of the Meditations and reading aloud, what Marcus Aurelius thought took, what his father had represented to him and what was a good leader, and this idea that we really need to look inward and think, what are these principles? But what I really come back to over and over again is George Eliot's Middlemarch, a meditation on someone who was not great, who had a great feeling and a great spirit and wanted to follow great people, but found herself hemmed in time and again by culture, through society, what are the expectations of her were, and that she could never be the version of Dorothea that rode on the horse completely free. And, I think about that just because of my own path a little bit, and also because of the ending, which will make me cry if I think about it, but it's this idea that, that the great majority of us, we live out our lives and we die and we are in unvisited graves, but that those lives still have meaning. And that to me is probably, that sticks with me.
Isn't it like something like, and that things are not so ill with us as they might be, rests on those who rely on those who rest in unvisited tombs.
Yeah. It's something like that. I can't remember the exact line, or would recite it pretentiously for everyone. But I can't. My mind doesn't work that way, sadly.
Sorry.
I just no. I just mean I can't think. My brain is not good enough. Is my point.
She can't confirm it. She didn't call you pretentious.
I know. No. I did. But no. But that's, to me, that's what just resonates with me again and again, is that your life is valuable. Your life is valuable whether you are a great person or not.
Yeah. So I want to pick up on, kind of. Wait. No, please. No, it's you.
It's
We
very
need to hear
important. It's you.
And I did mean it in the plural, not the one teacher. So I'm just saying, if you have plenty, the teachers that leave a mark, these authors, so don't feel compelled to choose. Yes,
Well, I want to say to what you were saying, if I remember correctly, that Lincoln had read the Elements, and then he lost his house seat. He had it for one term, right? And he fell into one of his many depressions. And he went back home and he reread the Elements as a way to address his depression, which I always thought was so fantastically weird and but also right in some way, that you could and I think there are many ways of thinking about how this might be useful. It's not, I don't think, like I'm going to force myself to be a logical person and ignore my feelings, but I think what it can be is, I'm going to very methodically pay attention to something and describe how it works to myself, and how you can restore your own equilibrium by doing something like that. And in my line of work, that happens by a sentence, and a sentence that is, all Johnnies know about talking about some of the propositions as elegant, more or less elegant. It never occurred to me before here to think of anything in mathematics as elegant or not elegant, but a sentence for sure, you know what I mean? The construction of some of those things is so poetically perfect that it gives you kind of emotional solace to be in the company of that kind of, self-awareness and self-control.
Okay. Sorry, this goes to show that even a tutor never learns. After years of practice to not interrupt, I still interrupt. But it was partly because I was so moved by that quotation, and thinking both of that kind of, we're not so ill and we may not be remembered, but also of the complexity that you mentioned, the appreciation of difference, a non-extractive way of thinking. Like, in a way, I think of all of those things as somewhat related. And I'm going to ask a question that's a little bit selfish, because it's one that I'm trying to work on both as a tutor but also as a person. And it's something like, here we get so much time to practice a kind of subtlety in thinking, or, anytime we have an idea that we're sure of, it's going to get messed with. And I think that's wonderful. But in a time and place where speed and a sort of extremity of opinion are often valued, I'm just curious, in your own lives, because all of you meet a lot of people, speak to a lot of people, have real influence, how do you kind of preserve the subtlety, the complexity, the appreciation of difference.
So one of the things that I think you learn at St. John's College that is essential to flourishing in all the different walks of life in which we represent here on the stage, especially if you're in the world of ideas and ideas that are sometimes neuralgic and ideas that people disagree about strongly. And as you say, right now we're in a moment where extremity is rewarded, hot take is rewarded, ad hominem is rewarded. And then people are also segmenting themselves into balkanized sort of epistemic bubbles where they never really, in some cases, never encounter other people that disagree with them, which is a horribly unhealthy way to live. And it's easy to do given technology and social media and whatever. The thing that I take from St. John's that I think really, and it could be true in any, no matter what you do, but in the world of arguments and ideas, the one thing that we come to learn here at St. John's is that the first order of business is to understand what's being said to you, right? The first order of business is not to react and not to pick points of weakness in the sentences that are coming to you and scoring points, but rather to genuinely, and I think it's actually an act of intellectual friendship is what we really cultivate here, including with people that you disagree with you and might irritate you, but at the end of the day, you have to be genuinely committed to sort of a radical hospitality and friendship in an intellectual space with other people. And so when you encounter an argument or an extended argument that you find that upsets you, like I try to remind myself and my students too, because I try to teach a real seminar in the law school, which is weird because law students aren't used to seminars, where we go around the room, everybody asks a question, I ask the opening question, then I sit. And I don't ever say anything specific or direct. I just ask questions the whole time. But the point is that when you're engaging people you disagree with, you have to, first of all, commit to understanding what they're saying in the strongest possible version that they mean it, not trying to take, slight mistaken phrases and attributing things that they don't actually mean, such that when you respond to them, they recognize their own argument and their own voice in your response. And that to me is something that we learn in the seminar. That's something we learn. So the idea of job one is to understand, and then job two, if you ever get to it, is to react. I forget your question. That might not have been responsive.
It's like pitch
Which
perfect.
undermines my answer, by the way.
Wait, does she recognize the connection in what you said?
Yeah, so I revealed myself to be a hypocrite in this very moment, which is important in its own way.
Yeah. I can take a stab at this also, having literally been in the center of hot takes and on First Take, a couple of times. But I think it's important when you're in it, having a discourse with somebody, and this may seem self-evident, but it doesn't always happen, that unless you are actively playing devil's advocate and being transparent about that you don't make arguments in bad faith. And to me, perhaps my career I would have skyrocketed. I'd still be on First Take today. But at the same time, I felt very uncomfortable ever being in a position where I was arguing something I didn't truly believe. And oftentimes that made me say no to suggestions about what I should be discussing. And, well, why doesn't this person take this argument and you take that argument? And I'd be like, well, because I can't make that argument. I don't believe in that argument. And just that in and of itself, I think, was, a way of, there has to be a level of honesty, I think, in dialogue, or you've lost the case. And I can remember being on Outside the Lines with Will Kane, who many of you may be familiar with. He's gone on to greater heights. About we were talking. It was the day after Aaron Hernandez had committed suicide in prison. He was a member of the Patriots, who had been found to have murdered somebody. And the next day, the Patriots went to the White House for their ring ceremony. And I remember being in this conversation with him, and he was like, "Yeah, well, it's important that they go and they celebrate." And I was like, I just can't argue that. These men have called each other family for years in this setting. And so what if they were just honest about what that felt like to have this terrible thing happen? And so I wasn't able to really do but I think you have to be honest about what you think.
So Sarah, I feel very specially suited to have been prepared by St. John's, given the work that I do now. As a community builder in this city, one of the initiatives that we do is quarterly storytelling nights. We elevate local creatives and change makers here in a very anti-St. John's format, because it's 6 minutes and 40 seconds precisely. It has to be accompanied by images that self-advance every 20 seconds. And it's been such a fascinating journey of what people love about this. So we get a large amount of applications from the community who want to speak. Each evening we could only do about 8 to 10 maximum. And we have now, we were at site, we were selling out in 20 minutes, 200 seats. So now we're at the Lenzig, which is close to 800 seats, and we're selling out there too. So it's been a really fascinating observation that I get to have about why do people, one, want to come to speak at this, besides just being visible, but I don't let them go and pitch whatever they want to pitch. They're going to be stuck with our story midwifery team for 12 weeks, right? And we're asking questions that gets to the essence of that story with them. And so there's a lot of work. 6 minutes and 40 seconds, I try to tell people realistically, that's about 60 hours of work, right? In addition to their lives. And then the audience the community comes, and they come consistently to be together in this experience. And I realize that the gift of St. John's that I have carried into this community is to honor the roots of the word conversation, which is to turn together. So when we go into the story behind the scene, when I'm helping each of the storyteller figure out, they pitch some idea, and I said, okay, that's a pretty good pitch, but probably don't get too married to that pitch, because once we get going, there might be the real story that comes out. So we're gonna go on this journey together to discover what's really in your bones that needs to be shared. So I would say that this aspect of the college fundamentally shaping the way this community is experiencing themselves, just based on the engagement that we're receiving through this platform.
I think about how important that conversation is. Oops, and I just dropped my phone. And I worry about this moment in time of where we are as a nation, where we are as a world. And if you believe somebody like a Ray Dalio saying we're in a nonviolent civil war, we have these deep divides that are unbridgeable, we're fundamentally not able to connect. Like, I still stand I'm hardwired for hope. And I still stand in a space that there is so much more that unites us and connects us than that divides us. And one thing that I learned very quickly at St. John's is do the work. Show up to class having done the readings, because if you look around the table, any of us who have sat in one of those rooms when somebody has not. And sometimes it's excruciating when they have not.
Especially if it's math.
And if you don't do the work, ask good questions at least, but be humble. And so in any time, in much of my work, I've had to work across these deep chasms. And much to my astonishment, the world of education has now become the crosshairs, the ground zero for so much of the culture wars. And in doing the work now, it's not reading hard things. Sometimes it's reading hard things. It's seeking to deeply understand where people stand in their truth, who they are, what they value. We do a lot of national bipartisan survey polling, for example, but getting to know communities, getting to know members of Congress, getting to know whoever I'm trying to work with, to really understand why they are asserting, to your point about good arguments, why they are asserting what they want to be true in the world. And then finding ways to communicate across those differences, the conversations that Annette was just talking about. And so I feel like in this moment of friction, doing your work, and one thing that St. John's taught me that I find most people in our country, in our world, struggle with is being really tough on the ideas, to your point, Carter, but really kind and respectful to humanity. We can do both things, and we should be really tough on ideas, even the ones that we hold dearest. But how do we do that in a way that preserves the dignity and the humanity? We went to a great lecture on Levinas a couple weeks ago here of the engagement of self and other, and how important that is. And so in all that I do, I try to live that. It's really hard when people like the red meat sound bites, or when people are like, holding signs and yelling things, but nonetheless, doing the work of understanding where people stand and why, and where you want to go together, and finding that common ground has really driven all of my work in education and public policy writ large.
One of the things I think, St. John's challenges you to do is that on succeeding nights for 4 years, succeeding Monday and Thursday nights for 4 years, you'll be shown competing arguments about and competing claims to truth about the most fundamental questions it's possible for a human being to ask about justice, love, virtue, the noble, etc. And you are challenged to be charitable because any one of those claims could be true, and it's your job to approach each one of them as though they were, to try it on. And so you're invited to be charitable to a point of view which is alien to yours and which might even be disgusting to you, or that might be hard for you to believe is true, and you have to be charitable enough to listen. I'm talking to you, Kant, which, over the course of time. Not only do you have to be charitable to Kant, you have to be charitable to the kid across the table whose interpretation of Kant you have contempt for. And you've had contempt for it since you were a freshman. And every time he or she opens her mouth, it's just you can't take it. But they might be right. You should continue to be charitable. Just as Kant might have the truth, so might Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones. And so there's a spirit of charity that one cultivates over the course of one's time here in pursuit of the truth. And then you are invited by at the end of the education to make up your mind. What just happened to you? What is true? Because now you've got to go out in the world and you've got to make decisions as a person of principle. And people, as we've said, are going to ask you, why do you think that? And so it's really, really valuable training for being charitable to an opposing viewpoint and understanding with that spirit of charity that you're also fallible, that not everything that you think is true. I learned that very quickly when I began to read people who were much more intelligent than me, that lo and behold, I was fallible. And so that you should keep in mind always your own fallibility. And so I think if one can do that, I manage a large organization, and one of the things I said in my letter to the staff whenever I came on board was for the first day, I want everybody in this organization to know I'm fallible and I'll make mistakes. And that's a feature, not a bug. And I welcome you to be fallible and to make mistakes. And so I think St. John's can really put those sorts of things in perspective for you and kind of permit you to navigate either a polarizing political time or disagreement in the workplace with someone if you develop those characteristics as you read these books.
Just one small thing. I think St. John's attracts a lot of people who come with strong opinions, and you leave bored with opinions. Just that they just become, after enough time, really unattractive to have to hang even with your own opinions, and then it's suddenly that's so freeing to be able to just observe something or analyze and listen to an argument and not have to have an opinion about it at all. You could just, God, for a fiction writer, it saved my life. No one was picking up my novel wanting to know what my opinion about the character was. They wanted to know, was she going to get across the ice skating rink or not? It's what's going to happen. It's just more interesting than opinions. Boo on pistis. Isn't pistis the word? There's a lot of pistis early on at St. John's.
Great. We will turn to questions soon, but I'll ask one brief last question. Thinking about our seniors who are on their way out, what advice would you give them in this kind of encounter that happens when you graduate with the outside world? I mean, we go to, I think this institution goes to great lengths in fostering this very special space that might seem contrived in a way and safe and ideal, And then you have to go into the world. And you all have faced that, and you have adapted somehow. And you look like happy people to me. How was that transition, and what advice would you give our graduating seniors on how to adapt to that change from leaving or encountering the world after leaving St. John's?
I was very sad, that's all. For like years. I was really, really sad. I didn't have any, I went directly into grad school doing exactly the thing I wanted to do with my life, which is still what I'm doing. And I had all these people who were actually like, now I'm on with my team, but they weren't really my team, really in the same way. And I've never had it again.
Yikes. Okay, so we can cut that part as we splice together the promotional film for the appointment, admissions office.
So wait, how did you get happy again then?
I fell in love.
Oh, okay.
We had a baby.
No, that's funny because
That'll do it.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody who knew what they wanted to do. And when I was a senior and a junior at St. John's, there were people who did stuff that had graduated a couple of years before. Like, that sounds kind of interesting. Like people that you sort of knew that were doing things. And I remember I was thinking, I just want to, the things I like about this, and this, Shiloh, this is not meant as an insult to people that do what you do, but I was like, the things I really like about political theory and political philosophy, I was told immediately that nobody cares about that in the world. Like, you'll never get a job, and there are only few, but you've proved that wrong, obviously.
I would say so.
But the point is that, so my favorite tutor at St. John's College was Nick Maestrelis, Mr. Maestrelis. And Mr. Maestrelis, I had him as a freshman seminar tutor. He advised my sophomore essay. He was my junior seminar and preceptorial teacher, and he advised my senior essay. Wow. So I love Nick Maestrelis. and I remember telling him, I said, I don't know what I want to do. I think about going to grad school in this. He's like, don't go to grad school in that. And then he says to me, he's like, and this is to your point, he goes, you love Miss Fitzpatrick, don't you? My girlfriend, now wife at the time, she was 2 years behind me, class of 1998. And I said, yeah. And he's like, just go to law school and be a lawyer. So you can marry her and have a family. And I was just like, okay. And I didn't even think about it. I was like, I love this man. He has my good is his good. He told me what to do, so I'm going to do it. And so I went to law school, and everything worked out great. Now I don't practice law. I make lawyers. I don't practice law. I do something kind of like I would have done if I'd studied political philosophy or something like that. But my advice is, to the students, talk to people that you love and meet people and see what they're doing and try out a bunch of different things. But relationships are what matter more than anything else. That matters more than a life plan. And the most interesting people doing the most interesting things did not plan from A to Z to get from here to there. They were open, they were friendly, they were generous, they were hospitable, they made friends, they did things for the sake of others, not expecting anything in return. And then they ended up someplace interesting. And I think that's a good way to be.
We both are partnered with Johnny's. I know a handful of us are. And so that's one way to carry the St. John's spirit forward. I am very proudly married to a Johnny whose deep love is Kant.
My apologies to that person.
We call that a red flag.
But that's even a way.
We've had many deep conversations about that.
Is your deep love Kant?
What's that?
Is your deep love Kant?
My deep love is not Kant.
Okay, all right.
No. But that's what keeps the productive friction alive. It sparks, with friction. No, what I was going to say, this is literally my jam. For the past 15 years on a national stage, I have counseled young people and designed school systems and federal policy and state policy on career pathways. And I've often felt like a charlatan because I have come up through such a unique and valuable foundation and have always held the both and of yes, have some technical skills, start somewhere, and remember that your learning is so much deeper, your life is so much deeper than getting a certificate related to advanced manufacturing. But yes, I want you to alleviate poverty. I want you to have economic and social mobility. I want you to have choices. And the reality is, I have contributed to an overly mechanistic and overly linear approach to how our nation is approaching college and career pathways. And I'm trying to, through my organization and my work somewhat at the federal level recently, think more nuanced about the both and approach for all of us. It shouldn't just be, some of us who get this rare and wonderful experience of St. John's, or being able to learn in community and think differently and be grounded in the core liberal arts. I want every single young person to be able to understand their relationship to self and others in the world through experiences like this. And I want young people to have real ability to navigate the labor market. And all the data today, whether you're looking at World Economic Forum data, whether you're looking at Bureau of Labor Statistics, I can talk to you about data all day long, tells us that young people today are going to change jobs 15 to 20 times over their lifetime. To Salvador's point about working during college, I worked 11 different jobs while I was here at St. John's, including with Jamie Guevara at Wild Mountain Outfitters. We worked together 30 years ago, and he's now in the audience, because I had to make ends meet. And our young people today are going to do that even more across 5 to 10 different industry sectors. The notion of a career being linear is a false construct. We're in a time of being nimble, and being able to be flexible and adaptive being the only way forward. And so St. John's provides that, the mental flexibility, the ability to challenge yourself, to continue to learn, because it's no longer a, go to high school, go to college, get your degree, get your job, work in your career, retire. That's not the case anymore. AI alone has proved that to all of us. We are going to be learning and working throughout our lives, and the kind of spirit of learning and culture of learning that this place imbues in every single one of us is exactly the skills that our young people need to thrive. So I would say start somewhere with something that gives you purpose, that you care about, that allows you to pay your bills, like Jamie and I were doing 30 years ago here, and also stay open to possibility. That is the only way forward. And I feel like St. John's is very well equipped. We often talk about durable skills and employability skills, and people are calling it 21st century skills. And I say, these were just as valuable in ancient Greece as they are today. The skills that make us uniquely human and allow us to move ourselves forward in connection with others is what's going to drive our future. And so I feel like St. John's is so well positioned to help every single young person leaving the college to take some bold next steps. But it's hard. The leaving, I was talking with a senior last night at our wonderful new president's inauguration, and he was mourning the loss of leaving this place. And this is a very special place, and I understand that. So stay connected through community, and build those connections and networks of social capital, but networks of friendship and soulship that sustain you. Back to your point about relationships.
I want to kind of come back to this, Salvatore, because I think I just, instead of being sad, I just started cultivating Johnnies everywhere, one of the things that I really saw, that the world is hungry for that deep listening and the patience and the generosity that you are, I think, to what you're saying, Carter, that you are hearing their best version of what they just said, and the generosity of mirroring it back to them. So I have found that people really like me to just be a Johnny, as long as I don't reference the authors in which formulated my thought, because that makes them feel alienated, because they don't need to know that. They just wanted to know, are they being heard? Is somebody in the world really listening and caring enough to help them understand this thing that they're going through, whatever it is, right? So I have found that I would say to all graduating students, the world needs you more than ever, because what you're getting here is such a rare training to be able to sit and relish ambiguity. I think it was you who said, we're so tired of opinions. The college incentivizes us not for having answers, but having good generative questions. That's what we applaud here. So if you have a good answer in seminar, it just deadens the conversations, no fun. And I would say that don't be afraid to not have a degree, and really think about that fundamentally you are being given such a precious training ground for that collaborative inquiry, which the world unfortunately is not preparing a lot of young people, because we overvalue right and wrong. You are been given a fertile ground to be quite adaptive in your thinking, because you've been presented with the diversity of things from one night to the next that are in contradiction, and you have to reconcile. And one of the other aspect of this education that has been fundamentally, I think, uniquely beneficial is that the world doesn't actually have a curriculum that you're gonna have to check off. The world that you are inheriting right now is full of complexity that we don't even know what the questions is. And so what this education allows you to be able to do is to figure out what is the question you're going to help answer. And then I do have one that has nothing to do with work, but very important for your happiness. Not every conversation with your loved ones is a seminar. It's not really about the truth sometimes. It's just loving enough with the other person to know what they need. We don't need to have the truth in every conversation.
I was looking at my husband on that one. What I would say is, like, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated, and I didn't find out I wanted to be a sports writer until 2 years later. I thought I wanted to go to law school. Unlike what Carter said, you don't have to go to law school. But the other thing I'll say is the thing you will be known for has probably not been invented yet. We are in such a rapidly changing environment right now. I think AI is going to radically redesign what jobs look like. And that is why this education is more important than ever. Because you have something that transcends whatever that change is going to be. Your mind is your own. And the other thing I would say is be prepared to continue to learn just as hard as you did at St. John's. With everything else that you encounter, find things to challenge yourself as you go. Like, I'm teaching a class on gender and linguistics right now at Columbia University. You could not, if I told like most of the people that I went to school with that I'd be doing that, they'd be like, excuse me? But you never know where you're gonna find yourself, and you just have to be open for the challenges. And when the opportunities come your way, saying yes, knowing that you are going to be guiding other people as you were guided. And so reinventing yourself, keeping your mind elastic, and taking things in is the most critical challenge.
I have very little to add. I think that was very good. I would only say my first instinct was to challenge the premise of the question, which is to say that there's a purity at St. John's which the exterior world itself doesn't have, and so you have to depart and leave. But I think the point has already been made. I think you shouldn't see it that way. I think you should see when you exit the institution, you go into your 5th year of education at St. John's. In other words, it's the world. And so the curiosity that you had here is, and this has already been said, is the curiosity that you should have in the world. The way that you interrogate authors here is the way that you should interrogate the problems you confront in the world. Such that for me, it was not depressing to leave St. John's, because I never left, because I just considered the education as a continuity, and now I'm coming up on 20 years since having graduated, and I still don't feel like I left. I wake up every morning thinking about the same sorts of questions that I woke up every morning here thinking about. And so I think it's probably best to see your exit from St. John's as part of a path that continues, not as a radical break in your life or a moment to which you'll never be able to go back.
Great. Well, why don't we take some questions? Just walk up to those mics and then.
I was just going to follow on your question to seniors by inviting you to address the people here who are long past being seniors. And the project of maintaining intellectual courage and encouragement for the long haul. You know, Scott Buchanan was in a forum like this at St. John's, and he was highly depressed, discouraged, disappointed. And Yasha Klein got up and he said, I don't agree with that. The intellect lives. I have 4 propositions for you, addressing Scott Buchanan. And he said, 1, the highest activity is intellectual activity. 2, this is not the normal activity of man. 3, the normal thing is a turning to life. 4, the better the preceding intellectual activity, the finer the turning will be. What would you say alongside Yasha Klein to encourage people to keep the course with courage?
and sometimes you just return home and play backgammon too, right? I was struck yesterday, I don't know how many of us attended the inauguration, the word courage came up again and again in describing this wonderful place, our esteemed president, and what this program does to instill in us to stand in a place of courage, in spite of the world or because of the world sometimes. And I really appreciate what you were saying, Shiloh, about how it invites us to really stand in a place of curiosity and not leaning in with assertions, and yet courage requires assertions too. And so I think how does one live a life of good? I mean, the foundation of this wonderful place is questions. Like, how does one live a life continuing to ask good questions while not being a flag in the wind on whatever the answers may be? And I think that is the courage that we all need to find for ourselves, is what are we taking from this about who we are and what we value? And how do we live that while continuing to ask questions, but not being such a malleable shape that we're shapeless? And we build free men and women and non-binary people through books and a balance, right? And I think about the great books, of course, and the balance that curiosity and courage must hold in the program and must hold in our lives, because I feel like they feel like a duality, and yet I feel like they're inherently interdependent.
I think there's a paradox in courage too in the context, because in some cases it can be self-indulgent to be courageous in asserting something that you believe, or demanding something of someone, or interrogating someone in an aggressive way. I think that can be important, obviously, in the right moments, but I think it takes more courage to be vulnerable and admit that you don't know the answer to something, or that be vulnerable and that you don't quite understand what a person's perspective is yet, and you're still processing it, or you're still analyzing all the different complexities of a particular issue, notwithstanding the fact that you might be in a community or a circle that wants you to say yes or no to a particular thing. And the courage to not have an opinion, right? The courage to not have a hot take, and the courage to forego the upward benefits of being a slashing combatant in culture wars or in online or what have you.
I love that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm struggling with even how to ask this question, but I suppose we are in a time of upheaval. The comment was made yesterday, and is always made, that the new program at St. John's was a way to sort of counteract the upheaval of the early, 20th century. And so with all the technological disruptions, hope you would forgive my Heidegger reference here, but one of the problems, of course, of technology is that for Heidegger was that we would no longer be able to think, like just flat out, right? And so I look at St. John's College and in my own life and in the life of our shared inquiry here, that partaking in the conversations and these texts have really helped us to strengthen that muscle. The challenge, I think, for me that I'm struggling with the question is, it seems as though being in the world requires thinking, but it's also inherently political. And so one of the things that I always wish is that our students would get more engaged in the political life. And by that I mean literally getting involved in local government, state government, federal government, legislation, policy, crafting things, because we have been steeped in philosophical inquiry, politics, how to live with each other in society, thinking about what we owe society and what society owes us. So I wonder if you would maybe share a few thoughts about whether or not it would behoove the college to, in a more robust way, support the political life very intentionally, as opposed to the contemplative life.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Can you be more specific about when you say, could the college facilitate or make room for more political life than contemplative life? Can you just give me concrete What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it could start with something like, you know, having more seminars or something like this. Well, I guess more maybe some outreach to policymakers and bringing in Congress people and senators and whatnot, and just having a, I don't know, making inroads and having discourse with folks that are in government. Part of the problem that I think has happened in society is that because folks like us aren't actually getting involved like we should, we get governed by people that are inferior in mind and in soul.
I hear you. I hear you.
Very topical.
Okay. So let's.
I don't mean that to be like pointed.
Yeah.
No, I really don't. But I think that we all sense that. Like we all sort of.
No
So
offense.
We're back in the Republic. We
Yeah,
hear you.
can I just say, like, so when I hear you asking that,
Yeah.
my little younger self, my heart is palpitated on behalf of that young person, because I don't know where we would fit this in. With the I mean, we were doing seminar during my time. I don't know if you guys know, they changed seminar hours these days.
Oh.
I know.
What time are they doing it now?
7:30 is when it starts.
So that's a half-hour shift?
That's an outrage. It ruined the whole thing.
Breaking tradition.
Walter.
So, I just want to be really honest, like based on my own human memory of what we were already being asked to do, I feel like I don't know if I have the capacity to do more. And the other part of it is that I really appreciated in some way the artificial container of being able to not actually have context that has to bear consequence in contemporary time. I know that sounds very privileged, but for a training of my mind, I needed to be able to step back, have the container and the context to purely be in this other space for me to cultivate the skills that I ended up cultivating. However, I do think, and I don't know who to pitch this to, I guess President Sterling is here. President Sterling, I am going to pitch that if there is an opportunity for the college to have programs to be able to offer seminars for our legislature, for our governing leaders, and I don't know if they need to be certified, but if we can do that, that I think gets us the result, right? Much faster than asking our students to do more and having to wait for them 20, 30 years from now to be able to enact change. I think there's an appetite right now in the current landscape for what St. John's has to offer. And I'm sure that the President Sterling is on it.
He actually is. He is on it. And the mayor from Santa Fe was yesterday here at the inauguration. And you've had many, I think, notable, maybe even controversial at times, people from the three branches come to speak at St. John's. I mean, I think a college is in a tricky place, you know, speaking from in an adjunct role at Columbia University right now, which is dealing with a lot of things on its own. But a college is in a tricky place when it comes to this kind of thing. You're not really in a position to advocate for one side or another. This is not the role of any institution. It really is to train the mind aside from politics and what that is, and so that free thinkers can then go into the world and decide how they want to engage politically. And to, again, as Shiloh was saying, you are interrogating all 4 years your own assumptions, your own, the things that you walk into a seminar thinking that you know. These things have to be something that you can change your mind on as you go through and you take in this new information and dialogue with these very pedantic people that you're engaging with over and over in a classroom setting. And that really is the role of a college. And then you can create free thinkers who go to do things and to be politically minded and to engage in their communities. That's my thinking. I think if you're trying to get people to think one thing or another in a classroom setting, or even encouraging political debate in that setting, it takes away from this idea of stepping back to look at these issues.
I also, I'm not sure if you know this, but Pierre here, who does not career development, but personal development, is that the new name now? Oh,
does everything.
professional. Don't forget to tell them that not every conversation with loved ones are seminars. But we do have these, Pierre have done such a great job building, direct pathway, internship pathway within our city government and state government and county. So there are opportunities for students to partake in that before they exit. Now, it wasn't there when we were students, but I'm really excited the college has made serious efforts and invested in this opportunity for that kind of live experience learning. So, but thank you for your question.
Thank you.
I really want to make sure that you get to that mic.
Oh, I was just thinking that since there's a big
Get to the mic.
Oh, go. Well, my question was kind of like, well, you guys have influence in each of your communities, and I was thinking as Johnnies graduate, and we have this mindset of making arguments, but also listening to them. But it's how do we create influence in the communities we go to, I guess? Because especially in a world where, it's this is a very existential crisis that I was having, that we do not actually live in a free world. But once we graduate and we have this freedom that we think we do, so how do we actually practice it or exercise it?
Well, I think it seems right now, I imagine we might seem quite powerless in that regard. And just this is a very shallow response to what you're saying, but to some degree, if you just go to some place and stay there for a while, roots go down, you get a job, you build a community, you get part of a community, people start to rely on you to do things, and things kind of rhizomatically grow like that, and then you suddenly find yourself 7 or 8 years into a community that you never, for me it was Provincetown, Massachusetts, I never expected to live on Cape Cod or anything like that. I got a writing fellowship there, I was there for 10 or 11 years, and I was I was a member of the town Democratic Committee. Why? I don't know, they needed somebody, so, you know what I mean? But there were things like that happened the key thing is that they would not have happened had I not stayed in some place for long enough to get to know what the community needed, what my work to do in the community could be. And it was completely invisible until I showed up there. So I would wager that you will find yourself somewhere within the next 10 years, having lived for a period of years in at least one place where those relationships started to build quite organically. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be intentional about it. You could, I think we're all saying, be intentional about community making.
And I would say build deep roots in a place, and a lot of research shows that it's the power of loose ties, the loose connections, that allow you to take some bold shifts and make some bold moves in your life. I bet you could LinkedIn every single one of us and be tapped into our networks of social capital. You are connected, you have social capital in ways seen and unseen, and the people around you, even those of us who don't even know you, believe it or not, especially here at St. John's, we all care about you and your future.
It's true.
It's true.
And
That's why we're here.
right? We are here because we believe in you. And
I woke up at 3:30 this morning, Eastern time.
Right?
My daughter,
Salvatore is here for you, is what I'm
My
hearing.
daughter peed on us in the bed. And I still got here.
And so, you tend to get jobs from the people you know, and your first job is usually from someone who knows you well. Later jobs are often through, I got my first job in Chicago right after graduating from St. John's because a woman who graduated in the year before me invited me to a party where I met somebody who hired me the next week. It's these connections. I think about happy last day of Black History Month. I think about Dr. King's notion that all are caught in an inescapable web of mutuality. I can't be who I ought to be until you are who you ought to be, and vice versa. And so you have more connection and capital and influence than you realize, and recognize that this community absolutely cares for you, and there are probably many others that do as well. But connect, ask questions. Like what I love about St. John's is it allows us to develop a sense of fearlessness with hard things. And it's a big world out there. Like stand in your power, and as much as you can muster fearlessness, like connect with people and recognize that they don't have to be your closest, best, nearest, and dearest to help you advance and have influence in your world.
I only add a small thing, which is I would challenge you to think of the predicament this way. Don't think of your mission as accumulating influence. In other words, so what's good is the prior question, because if you have a lot of influence and you do what's bad, that will be bad. And so you should begin to think about the accumulation of wisdom first, and then influence second. And I suspect the one will bring the other. And so I think we live in an influence economy where people are accruing influence, especially with respect to trading followers on social media and these sorts of things, for a purpose which is, either vapid or merely commercial or highly partisan and political. Whereas if a person were to focus on making themselves into a wise person of substance and character, then you might be in a position to do good things, and that might permit you the influence, in quotation marks, at least in my view, that you desire.
Take my cue. Maybe I'll hold that. It's drooping. I wanted to raise the issue of, sometimes the classics seem anachronistic, and there's a generational side to this. Someone reminded us earlier today in the Alumni Association board meeting that students today are such a different generation as millennials that even since they were images in their parents' wombs, they have been online, and this perception that things are totally different, even though if we see the great books as a living tradition and this ongoing conversation, there's a sense in which every generation is reinterpreting, and whether we're coming from this culture or other traditional cultures, having to reinvent meaning and culture and tradition in our lives. I was wondering if you could speak to that generational difference perception that sometimes we encounter. Thank you.
Who wants to tackle that one?
I need more clarification.
I kind of think it was ever thus, right? Weren't they saying the same thing about us?
Yeah.
I think every generation may bump into this, but if people are looking at you as, how do we, as, I'm class of '89, right? And so do I have the understanding of what a young person today is going through, being so hooked in 24/7 online?
No.
And yet there's a sense in which the values and these ideas, we're tough on ideas, and we need to be compassionate about this new situation. You've raised such good thoughts here, and there's friction in this. But there's also a sense, I think, in which we had to reinvent this for our generation, because the world has been changing rather rapidly, but it's accelerating. I guess maybe just whatever wisdom you might offer on this that you haven't already given us a clue. Does that help?
Yeah. I have trouble getting students to read just basic text outside of St. John's. I think having a student today who wants to opt in to the volume of reading they have to do here, it's a miracle, honestly, considering. But at the same time, I think, I'll give this, when I had a group of seniors at NYU last year for a sports ethics class, and the first night I read that passage from Marcus Aurelius, and then I looked up and I said, that was written 2,000 years ago. And one of my students audibly gasped, just had no idea, that someone from so long ago could sound so present. And I think, in some ways that's what St. John's does, is that it shows you that these voices from 2,000 years ago are relevant to you in your life today. And that you need to hear them and listen, be able to listen to what they're trying to tell you. And so I think, yes, it's very different, but they are being inundated, their attention spans are tiny, and in some ways, it's almost like a conversation first, book second, because it's very challenging for them to expand into thinking that reading is gonna get them something. I think that's the challenge that I've found in teaching, students today.
So I just want to interrupt briefly and say I want to honor everyone's attention spans. It's been a little while. I also want to honor the patience of these three people who've been waiting quite a while. So maybe we'll hear each of your questions. A couple people can respond, and then we will join in other groups of conversations.
And I'd love to follow up with you on the question of digital natives and how to engage youth voice in a way that is meaningful to them. So I'll find you afterwards.
Ideal.
Perfect.
Please.
All right, thank you. I happened to attend the University of Chicago when I was young, and that was by accident. But I was very pleased to find this place. I'm a mere townsperson, and this looks oddly familiar to me, this curriculum and this panel. So I wish to ask this. About 40 years ago, a professor at Chicago named Alan Bloom published a book called On the Closing of the American Mind, something like that. I think I read it when I was like 15, so I probably don't remember anything. Maybe you can say something about it. But in many ways, I hear of Buchanan. He sounds a lot like Robert Maynard Hutchins to me at Chicago in 1930 or thereabouts, and also Professor Mortimer Adler.
Of course.
So those names might sound familiar to people who know this kind of debate about curriculums. Apparently, Bloom was so enthralled with the great books and their universality, he translated Plato's Republic at one point. We read that. And also Rousseau's Emile, which was his answer to Plato, from the way I remember it. In further reading in history and the like, apparently Mao Zedong also got a big helping of the great books at the end of the Qing dynasty. And my question is this, setting it up a little bit, so thank you for the patience, is how do you get Alan Bloom and Mao Zedong from the same curriculum, in part? And I thought you might have some fun with that, so thank you.
Well, doesn't it do violence to the phenomenon to say that that curriculum produced both of them? I mean, weren't there many other things that produced both of them?
I think you're right, and that's why I asked.
We contain multitudes.
I mean, sorry.
Let's hear, we'll hear the questions and then we'll dig in.
That sounds great.
Sorry,
Yeah.
couldn't help myself.
So,
That's great. He's great.
sorry, thank you. My question is regarding to Mr. Brooks's response to, right, you were asked what was like the most challenging thing you encountered first coming to St. John's. And you said you came with those like presupposed ideas of what, you know, what the truth is for like core problems like political stuff, love, virtue.
Yeah.
And then St. John's taught you what the real truth is.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
I think that's, maybe I misunderstood it. But maybe directed you to what truth?
To different alternatives to what it might be.
Sure.
It opened my horizon to the various things love or truth or justice might well be. I only knew one thing. Now I know 10.
So I guess my question would be, do you think any of those have an answer that is like objective in a way? Or, I mean, I know it's a big question, but is it fair to say that maybe we're not getting more legitimate answers, but maybe ones that are harder to disprove? And so, like, what are we really doing here? Is it for the sake of really getting knowledge, or just being able to get thoughts that are harder to disprove or harder to disprove, I guess is the word, but yeah.
Are we waiting?
Well, yeah, let's hear the last
Okay.
two, and then we'll attempt, we will help you remember.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Unanswerable.
We'll attempt to answer a few, and then.
That'll be a challenge.
I know, yeah.
My name is Jeff Valero, Annapolis, 1988. I wanted to speak first to a little something about politics as a Johnny, and then I want to pose a question that I hope will be answered. So as a student, I got involved during the legislative session in Maryland, working for money for the Civil Engineers Association of Maryland. And I would pick up bills and I would figure out what the association wanted to pitch to the legislators, and I would actually go in and say, hey, Civil Engineers Association wants you to vote yes or no on this bill. And later in my life, I became politically active in my city, and I am a civil structural engineer to this day. So it was very influential in my life in many ways. So I just want to encourage Johnnies that they can be politically active even now as a student if there is no official organ for that in the curricula. And then the question I wanted to pose, I heard some really dear things said about seminar, and that you have to have a sort of empathy, kind of a love for everyone around the table. And to this day, I can't think of a better group than my seminar folk from my class, as diverse as they were politically. And I have not found in my professional life anything that came close to the intellectual honesty of seminar. And I've been involved in politics. I've been involved professionally. Typically, everybody in the room is looking to see what, you know, the apex person in the room wants, and then they try to align with that. The only place I've found anything close to seminar is either with alumni events where we have a seminar, or symposia with my friends who, you know, I've chosen over the years who are people that I can have these kind of conversations with. So I'd like to ask each of you, if you're able to, if you have the time, authentically to tell me in your professional life, have you been able to either recreate that or have something like that? That's what I thought. But anyway, I'm gonna let you answer. So thank you for the opportunity.
Final question.
Hi, Vincent Reese Gonzalez, Annapolis 14. So, my father's a roofer. I'm a firefighter. I know master electricians. I know battalion chiefs who are alumni, but I don't see any on stage. And I'm wondering about the connection between this education and work of the body, more labor. How does it enter into it? How can we kind of use this education to inform labor and labor to inform this education?
Okay, I'm going to try to very briefly summarize, then we're going to give you not enough time to answer. And then, actually, I just want to remind everyone, first of all, thank you so much. This has been a lovely afternoon, and there will be books to buy and possibly to convince these lovely people to sign just next door in the junior common room after this. Okay, so we have lovely questions. Labor, the relationship with labor. We have seminar in your own current life. Can you find it? Does it work? We have, are we actually finding or producing knowledge, or simply kind of a garden of alternatives? And Mao Zedong.
Wow. I wanted to address what is your name?
Omar Hutton.
Omar? Okay. What I heard your question, if I may just repeat it back, because I think I hear it differently than Ms. Stigney just asked it, is that you're asking, at the end of the day, is there really truth that is that is like we're gonna find? And I would say that based on my understanding of this group, is that is only up to you. What the college offer is a sampling of what may be possible. What it also offers is a lot of friends to helping you figure out what resonated as true for you. And I would say that based on what I heard this group is also presented, is that it evolves over time and not to be concrete and finite in your evolution. But at the end of the day, I hope that there's something that for you that resonated true enough to launch your 5th year of St. John's out in the world. And then keep testing it out, like what needs to be modified next.
I'll add to it. I think the enterprise of philosophy set sail early in the world as an enterprise which assumes there's such a thing as truth. And so when I think about what it means to philosophize, I think about it in the Greek sense, which means even if we don't know the truth, we presume on the course of the quest to it that it exists. And I think it's fatal to the enterprise of philosophy if at any point we decide it doesn't exist. That then makes philosophy impossible, or at least useless, and in some ways not in keeping with what original philosophy was. I happen to be a scholar of Nietzsche. He's the one who commits that crime against philosophy. So I've now criticized my own mentor. So I'll say that, but there's a more profound point here, or at least one I think that might be more immediately useful. It's one thing to speculate theoretically whether answers are possible or not. But what none of us do is leave that speculation or the stakes of that speculation merely in the theoretical world. In other words, you have to live your life. And insofar as you live your life, you live it as though there were a ground under you, because you make decisions every day. And in that sense, even if you don't operate on the basis that there's such a thing as absolute truth in your mind, you go through the world making decisions that you're confident are the right decisions. And so you act that way. That's some indication that there might well be truth, right? Or something of that kind. After all, you have to have something under your feet to live. We can talk about, as I mentioned, I teach Nietzsche. He has this very famous formulation that the West consists primarily in modern times of Christian morality without the Christian God. That there are people who say with their mouth that they don't believe in God, and yet they will extol to the teeth virtues of charity and love and neighbor love and these sorts of things, even though they have no operation of Christ in their heart or something like that. And so what I mean here is we say a thing that's sophisticated with our mouth, yet each day we wake up, we make decisions which betray what we think. We have to. The person who didn't think there was a God might well be plunged into the chapter of the Brothers Karamazov in which Ivan Karamazov declares rebellion against the world. Why should I not be a nihilist and kill everyone and kill myself and chop you right? You see what I mean? But none of us do that. Very few of us do that. So insofar as that's the case, we think that's not the right thing, even if we say with our mouth, he's right, he's got it. You're not going to go out and murder babies. You see what I mean? And so I think this is all some evidence for us to think about the way truth operates and to keep alive the hope that even if you don't have it now and you're, 18, 19, 20, 21, that in keeping with the original intention of philosophy and just the fact that you have to live a life based on principles that you will make decisions from, that it's there and you may have it inside of you already.
Well, and to that point, there are ethical traditions that go back well before Christianity, and you can choose from Aristotelian ethics or Kantian ethics, or you can be utilitarianist or consequentialist, or have some version of combination of those and throw a little feminist ethics in there as well. So I think the idea, though, is that you choose a path that resonates for yourself and which you feel is getting you closest to truth, whatever that is. And it's not just strict relativism. That's not how we live our lives. But it is this idea that you have seen something and it has meant something to you, and that you go forward toward that even though we're all fallible. And it's the idea that sparks something within you as a way of living a principled life that is meaningful.
I just one quick sentence to add to this to support what's been said so far is sometimes you hear the St. John's education described in the public square as like radical skepticism, question everything, relativism, and I think that everyone, if I understand what's being said, is saying that's not it. That's not what we're doing here. Whether it's a provisional quest for truth with a hope that there's truth to be found, or even just being exposed to ideas and thinkers that are humbling, and the kind of humility that this program. So there's a confidence this program engenders, right? Like I can do hard things. I can muddle through Faraday if there's somebody in the room that can do the math that I rely on, like Jen Donnelly, whose parents are sitting right here. She could do the math always. But also humility, right? Like I don't actually, and I don't have I have to understand that there are ideas and people that are complicated and beyond what I've thought thus far, and maybe beyond my capacities as well. And so it's a paradoxical gift you get from St. John's, which is confidence, but also a sort of humility.
can I ask Carter this? Do you feel like that the confidence, the humility for me, I'm curious about whether it's the honesty with yourself more than the skepticism of other people. It's like, are you being honest with what you are saying and what you're living?
I think authenticity and being honest is an essential component of learning, and it's not a coincidence, it's also an essential component of friendship. Like actually being honest about what you know and you don't know, and that feeds to the courage point that we talked about earlier, and vulnerability as well. Can I just say one quick thing to the fellow who's the firefighter, class of 2014? I think there's so much in the program that is important to embodied excellence and building. I mean, you've got obviously Homer, you've got Being at Work. I mean, there's so many different, they're beautiful novels. There's so much in the program that nourishes not just a life of the mind and a kind of thought, whatever industry, but like a life of the body, embodied excellence, doing work in the world. I think there's so much that can be taken from the program, and I think it would be a wonderful thing to hear from folks like yourself who have made that their vocation, and to ask you, like, what do you get from the program, right? What is it? I'm not asking you to answer the question, put you on the spot. I'm just saying I agree with you. Implicit in your question was the notion that we should hear from folks who live embodied lives and embodied vocations and ask them how they were nourished by the program. And I'm confident that there's enormous resources within the program for that.
I mean, it is very precious that we are all, in fields that allow us to live a life of the mind in ways that feel different in kind in many ways than the life that you're living in skilled trades. And a lot of my work historically has been on, working with unions and apprenticeship and building up career pathways in the life of the mind connected to hands-on, real-world application of knowledge and practice. But I want to try to knit together everybody's questions, and let's see if I can successfully do this. Earlier this week, I mentioned I had an all-staff and I talked about Newton's Principia. It's because I was talking about his love of calculus and his deep love of alchemy, right? And I could also take this down a Rumsfeld road of known knowns, known unknowns, unknown unknowns. Like, there are things that we have technical solutions to. There are truths in the world. There are problems that we know how to solve. There are research and evidence-based. Yes, the world of science is one that's evolutionary. We all know that from having come through the program. But we have good solutions and good answers that are as close to a truth as one can have. And there's a whole body of work that we do not know. Like, there's a lot of not knowing in the world. And a lot of, if the problems were all solvable, like, we would all lead very boring lives. And I feel like the adaptive space is really what St. John's helps us prepare for, is how to continue to address and push that Sisyphean boulder up the hill, like the unknown, the known unknowns, the alchemy, the magic in the world that we do not have ready truths for, ready answers for. And the only space where I found something even akin to a seminar-like spirit is where I have been in community with people who are earnestly putting their shoulder to the stone, to the wheel, to work on developing possible solutions to the conundrums of our society. So in my space, it's public policy. Like, there are research and evidence bases on certain things, but there are a lot of things we don't know. We're making big decisions about billions and billions of dollars that we hope are going to make a difference in people's lives. How do we do that together? And having the space where we're earnestly engaging in a space where we don't come with absolute certainty, but an earnest dedication to something bigger than all of us, is the only space akin to a seminar table that I've experienced. I'm very grateful that I've been able to create that in my work. Also, being the leader of an organization, often people look to hierarchy. I mean, we know this starting with Plato, right? You look to hierarchy for certainty and answers. And if you as a leader can create spaces for uncertainty and questions and learning together, it shifts culture. It shifts behavior in new ways. So I feel like that's another angle in. And on the skilled trades front, like, so many Johnnies go on to really powerful lives as firefighters. As I worked as an EMT, I actually took time off from St. John's, went to Santa Fe Community College and Northern New Mexico Community College, got my EMT license, worked at St. Vincent's. Like, those are my Santa Fe side hustle 11 jobs that I worked in. And I feel like there's such value for us to hear those stories and to be grounded in what the good, the true, and the beautiful of that work. And that is a space that I would love to work with the college in making sure that we elevate lived experience and voices. And like, there's also lots of unsolved challenges in those spaces too, and every day. The world of work matters. There's such dignity and purpose in work. And every day, no matter what work you do, like, you are solving challenges. And I feel like the Johnny space of the mind can be applied in practice in so many different ways. So thank you for raising that angle into the conversation. I probably missed one angle of the conversation, but I think I did it.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. This was really lovely.